tonight's program. There we go. We will be recording tonight's program, and it will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email. I am also enabling closed captions so that if you need to use closed captions, you'll see the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and you will receive closed captions for the event. We will have time for questions at the end. But if you have questions before that or you don't want to forget, go ahead and use our Q&A box or the chat throughout the program as you think of your questions, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can at the end. And lastly, we are in webinar mode, which means we cannot see you and you cannot see each other. So again, if you need to ask a question, please use the chat or the Q&A function. So without further ado, I am pleased to be here tonight with Katie Bodenhorn-Barnes, who is our in-house genealogist at HSP. Welcome, Katie. Glad to see you. Katie is the Director of Genealogical Programs and Services at HSP, who has been in this role for just about a year now. She came to HSP from Legacy Tree Genealogist in Salt Lake City, where she spent 7 years as a senior editor and researcher across a wide range of geographic specialties. Katie holds a bachelor's degree in family history and genealogy from Brigham Young University, and tonight she will present on how to access and most efficiently make use of image-only record collections. So I will pass it on to you, Katie. You're muted, or we cannot hear you.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes, yes. And using the handout, and I will be dropping the handout in the chat momentarily.
Yeah, good point. Also, just with a quick note for the questions at the end, sometimes this comes up. I've done a few of these webinars now. I may not necessarily know the answer to your question, but I'm always happy to try to answer it if you want to drop me an email. The contact information is on the handout. So let me know at the end if I have not answered something for you satisfactorily. Okay, let me start my slideshow as we do. Oh, why did this start in the middle? Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. Maybe we'll get off to a good start now. So tonight we're going to be talking about using image-only collections. And there are a lot of you here, which suggests to me that this is something that a bunch of you wanted to know about or that isn't talked about enough. And in my experience consulting with and working with hobbyist genealogists, I think this is definitely true. So what are we talking about and why are we talking about it? Well, a quick definition. What I'm talking about here are historical images, like you can see pictured here, that have been placed online in a digital capacity, but they have not yet been made name searchable. They haven't been indexed or transcribed. You can't just plug in a name in a data box or a database box and pull up a name of your ancestor, but you can view the images. So if this is what you're accustomed to doing in genealogy, which I think is most of us, you know, this is the easiest way to do things. You know, getting onto Ancestry, for example, and seeing this search box and then plugging in the information that you have about your ancestor. And then bottom left here, scrolling through all of the different kinds of records that Ancestry has about that person. This is not what we're talking about. You will not be doing this at all in this process. And that's one of the double-edged sword aspects of online genealogy, I think, is that aggregator sites like Ancestry and Family Search have made this searching so easy and so convenient. It's wonderful. It's such a time save. But I want to make sure that it also doesn't make us lazy genealogists who are missing things because we think this is all there is. Why would we want to do this? Well, first, it's just good standard practice per the genealogical proof standard to conduct reasonably exhaustive research. Not just the easy records, not just the easy ones to read or the ones that we initially know about. You can't leave a stone unturned if you don't know where all the stones are first and how many there are. This is a good example of why this is important. This is from Family Search just in February of 2023 with their record collections. They have 12.5 billion historical records, searchable names. So that's when you would go and plug in your name and pull up those results by name. But you'll notice here that they also have approaching 5 billion digital images published. That is quite a lot of images that are not necessarily name searchable. And many of the records that are going to fall in this category are some of the key sources for researching difficult pre-1850 and colonial ancestors. Think about it, pre-1850 is about where a lot of us get stuck, especially somewhere like Pennsylvania. Think about what records you typically use to research ancestors and connect generations in the late 1800s and early 1900s. You're usually working with birth and death certificates that are more or less easily available. You're working with detailed federal or state censuses, newspaper articles. For most people researching their ancestry in the United States early on, and maybe in a lot of other locations around the world as well, you're not going to have many of these resources the further back in time you go. So what are you going to use instead? Well, for US ancestors, you're probably going to be digging into sources like probate files, wills, estate files, things like that, deeds, other land records, tax lists, other property related documents. After all, this is what our ancestors would have tracked most carefully, especially since they were not creating records for us as genealogists. But because a lot of these documents are lengthy, they're not as easy to transcribe or as user-friendly as, say, a register style record like a census where you have neat little lines for each person. They have not always been first on the list for indexing and transcription efforts. And what this means for you is that while many deeds and probate and other records from the earliest days of European settlement in North America may be digitized, they may not yet be name searchable. And this will apply in a lot of different categories, not just property related records, but for a lot of us in this meeting, that will be something that you will be most interested in. This lecture is focused heavily on family search and to some extent ancestry as two of the most popular genealogy sites, and also family searches, especially large collections. However, I did also want to point out that this applies to places like Historical Society of Pennsylvania here in Philly, where I work. We have a digital library at digitallibrary.hsp.org that contains tons of photographs, documents, other images that are not transcribed either, including a lot of family genealogies and books. So be sure to visit HSP's digital library and make a search there, and use this principle to visit and check out the genealogical and historical societies of other places where you have ancestry, because they may very well have similar resources that are going untapped. This can also apply to things like special collections at university libraries. I've definitely used those. The National Archives, the Library of Congress. If Family Search has 5 billion, images that are probably not transcribed, you can imagine what's just chilling in vaults and on shelves elsewhere, and that may have been put online, but that you're not using because they are not as easy to use. Here's a good example. This is a will of a man named Thomas Greasley from Bucks County, Pennsylvania in 1726. This will, at least on Family Search, is not yet indexed, which means that you would have to go page by page through this Bucks County will book in order to find this document. And when you look at it, the value becomes immediately apparent. I have underlined here all these family members that Thomas named in this will, such as his sons John and William. He even names his, at the bottom here, well-beloved father, John Greasley, and his wife, Dorothy. So this is 1726. You're not going to have birth records, maybe some church records, but there are a lot of documents that you would use if this family had lived in 1926 to identify the complete family, including all of the children. There are not going to be those kinds of resources available to you by and large for the early 1700s. So it would be well worth your time if someone like Thomas Greasley is your ancestor, to seek out his will, for example, or other property related records he may have had that are likely to name those family members that were his heirs or people with whom he did business. This is just one example. Here's another example. Family Search has a database called Pennsylvania Landing Reports of Aliens 1798 to 1828. So again, these are going to be early immigrants to Pennsylvania. And this is not indexed either. This is one of those image-only collections on Family Search that you have to browse through. One of the things that I liked about this, they're essentially early naturalization records, and many of these are going to contain information that is very, very difficult to find in this time period elsewhere. You'll note that this guy, John McQuinn, is an immigrant that in this document specifically names where in Ireland he was born. It also gives his birth date and the day he arrived when he landed in Philadelphia. So lots of people spend years and years beating their heads against the wall on early immigrant origins. So make sure that when you are researching, for example, in Pennsylvania, you're not leaving out, these available resources that might very quickly answer your question. And these are kind of, good special examples that are really meaty, full of a lot of good information. That's not always the case. You're not always going to get the same level of detail. I don't want to mislead you and make you think that hiding in plain sight is actually the answer to all of your questions. That would be really nice, but that's not what you're always going to be able to expect. But these are examples of why you might consider looking for things. So we're going to do a little bit of a dive into how you can access these records, some more examples of what these are, what these look like, and how you can find them, because they're not just going to come in if you're plugging a name into a database. I put one word here, catalog, because you'll want to be using the Family Search and Ancestry catalogs pretty heavily, which we'll talk about in just a minute, in order to access these records. But I wanted to get you in a different mindset before we go forward. When we're talking about a catalog, we're talking about, most of you who have used a library, if you've ever, used the old Dewey Decimal, whatever you need to do, there are a lot of these are going to be organized by title and by place rather than the name of your ancestor that may be one of hundreds or thousands of people mentioned in that record set. So I want to get you into a records and place centric mindset instead of a ancestor name mindset. A names mindset can be one of those lazy man's ways that we miss things when we're doing research. And by the way, I just kind of want to point out here that some of this should not be a new concept to a lot of you, especially those of you that have been doing genealogy since pre-internet times. This is essentially looking at microfilm. You're just doing it on your computer. When you took a microfilm to your local family search center, to the family history library, or at HSP, you plugged in that microfilm roll and you scrolled through and you sat at that microfilm reader and rolled the thing. And, you weren't expecting to be able to type in a name and have your ancestor pop up. It was this very methodical browsing process. So for most of you, this will not be a new concept. It'll just be getting into the habit of how to find the records in the first place. So these catalogs on the left here, you have the Family Search catalog. This is an example of what it looks like. On the right here, we have HSP's catalog. So both of these, you could go in and use these search terms here to find out what records exist for maybe the surname or the book title or the author that you're looking for. Typically, when I'm doing genealogical research, it's best I start with a place. I want to know what records Family Search or HSP have for that specific place so that I can know that I'm looking at everything that I need to see. There's also this is on the handout. I will do a little bit of a demo here in a little bit. There's also a location list that can help you cut down on that time. But so if I went into the Family Search catalog, for example, and I search for Bucks County, Pennsylvania, this is one of the options that comes up here. And I'll show you quickly, how you're to read through this. This is a catalog to Family Search's library, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah. So it's going to be, what you're going to be looking at here is the title, which explains what's the name, it's the name of the collection and what approximate time span it covers. Sometimes it will note whether there is a handwritten index to it, the creator, the jurisdiction here, so that's the place. And then as you go down, scroll down further onto the page, you'll see that these are the individual microfilms, the original microfilms on which these documents were scanned. Now, these days, most of them have these little cameras next to them, you'll notice here on the far right. And these cameras signify that they have been digitized. What they don't tell you, or what these are available, but if you ever see one, we'll talk about this in a minute, with a little strike through on it, or key over it rather, that usually means it is restricted. We'll talk about that. If they are indexed, it'll have a little magnifying glass next to it so that you know that you can search by name. But exercise caution there too, because sometimes the microfilm, the individual microfilm, is only partially indexed. And so you might still go in, put in a name, not find your ancestor, and not realize that it's because maybe only the first half of that film has been completed. But there's no, we only have this halfway done, fun little icon. So always be sure that you're going in and browsing the images themselves to make sure that you know what's in there, what's not, and you're not throwing in the towel preemptively. And as I mentioned, outside of property records in the US, this can apply to a lot of other places and other styles of records as well, especially for those of you that have, for example, ancestors, especially recently from other countries, or that have records published in other languages. I've done a fair amount of Puerto Rican research, and this comes into play a lot, or it used to more. They've made a lot of progress in indexing these records, but this used to come into play in my research a lot, which was that Puerto Rico started civil registration of births, marriages, and deaths in 1885, which is pretty late, which means that if you wanted to trace your Puerto Rican ancestors beyond that, you'd be pretty reliant on Roman Catholic parish records. But for a lot of these municipalities in Puerto Rico, the records were not, those Catholic records were not indexed yet. The civil registration was, but you might hit a wall. If you didn't know that there were Catholic records digitized that you could browse through, you'd be missing another century or more of records for your ancestor. So this is for the municipality of Humacao in eastern Puerto Rico. This is another example here where they have all these baptismal records here from 1807 to 1825 that are digitized. You just can't search them by name. And as I said, this was a lot worse of a situation a few years ago when I was doing more of this research. Family Search has done a really admirable job in getting these records transcribed very quickly. So a lot of the records that were not available to me 3-4 years ago, Catholic records for Puerto Rico, are now. So keep checking back also and seeing if the records that you need have been updated yet. Quick note on the restricted records we wanted to talk about. This is primarily a Family Search thing. Undoubtedly, you've run into this at some point. Instead of that little camera, you'll find this camera icon with a key over on top. And what this means is that Family Search, which has aggregated these records, taken them in from another repository, maybe the church, maybe an archive, that repository has put limitations on who can view the images. They've allowed for them to be digitized, but you can't necessarily view them under certain circumstances. So if you have the little key and you're logged into your Family Search account, that just means that under your account, you do not have permission to view those images from home. That doesn't mean you can't view them anywhere or ever, but it will often require you to visit a specific place. So Family History Library in Salt Lake, or way more conveniently for most of you, a Family Search Center in your area, or an affiliate library. For example, HSP and GSP are affiliate libraries where you can come and get on our computers and see these records that would be restricted to you at home. And there's lots of different reasons I won't get into about why these contractual agreements are the way that they are. But just know that that's a thing. Now we're going to jump to Ancestry real quick. I think the fact that Ancestry has some image only collections is not as well known as family searches. So I just wanted to walk you through very quickly how you can find some of these. They're not quite as easy to find, and there aren't as many of them. But you'll want to go into the card catalog, just like you did with Family Search, and just like you would with HSP or another repository. Yes, Ancestry does have a card catalog. You go up here to search, select it here. And then it's going to give you this option for for titles or keywords, or you can filter your desired results by the type of record or the event that it describes. And as you'll see here on the far right, you have the title of the collection, the type, the category it's in, and most importantly, you have the records here, the number of records that are in this particular database. And I need to make a quick note on the records terminology, because Ancestry and I think Family Search use this similarly, which can throw you for a loop if you're from maybe more of a history background than genealogy. These records refer to names. How many names, indexed transcribed names, are in their collections. It's not referring to page numbers, number of images, none of that. So that's why this makes sense. If I sort my searches up here at the top by what was it called? Number of records. There will be some that will pop up that have 0. And you may say, hey, what's up with this? It looks like this is an empty database. It's not. It's full of images, many, many images, but these records just have not yet been transcribed. And so you can still go in and browse the collection, and it will even let you, as with Family Search, break it down by what were probably microfilms, individual categories that you can then go through one by one. You can also they usually have an explanation paragraph about what's in these records, where they got them from, what they're like. In this particular case, these are residence registers from Germany, late 1800s, early 1900s. So normally, when you're on Ancestry, you'll have a little button here that, is the index for all the names that appear on the page. In this case, there aren't any. There's definitely a name here, but it hasn't been transcribed yet. So you've instead got this film strip where you can browse through one at a time, and you can still download these individual images like you would normally. And a few tips we've kind of mentioned so far that I wanted to help you keep in mind as you're making these searches is to check multiple sites and repositories. So Family Search may have a collection that has not yet been indexed yet, but maybe Ancestry has that and they've made more progress, or Find My Past or something. There's a frequent question about which genealogy site should I subscribe to, especially since we all don't have unlimited resources to be able to subscribe to every possible genealogy site. Well, the answer to that is always the very frustrating, it depends, because each database kind of has its own focus, or each website has its own focus, its own collections, and it helps to look at those catalogs to see what they have and in what condition they are. That will help you determine whether that's a valuable purchase for you. So be sure, if you're seeing something and it looks like it's not indexed, don't throw your hands up quite yet and go, I don't have time to spend 6 hours, going through these images page by page. Make sure that they're not somewhere else on a different website. Google can be as simple as that, a simple tool that can help you determine that. We talked a little bit about point 2, which is that a collection may only be partially indexed. And that it's important to check back periodically over time. The project may be complete next time you visit the site. We will also talk in just a few minutes about ways in which you can contribute to making those databases searchable. It's a pretty cool initiative. And finally, I have an example here on the bottom left of what I'm talking about in point 3, which is that many image-only collections still have handwritten indexes. So if you were going through this whole process with me and thinking, this is ridiculous, like, no wonder I'll never find anything because I don't have time to spend my entire day going through thousands of pages. A lot of records, thankfully, don't actually require you to do that. You may not be able to type a name in, but frequently at the beginning of a volume or microfilm, or maybe at the end, as with a book, there might be a table of contents, there might be a name index. Frequently, these are, depending on the kind of records, they might be indexed by the name of the person. This happened to be for the naturalization records, so these are the people being naturalized. But you'll see here, these are the Bucks County, the wills. And so you've got a name here, it'll give the year of the event. And what's more important is that it will give the book and page number you're looking for. And sometimes those indexes, as we saw a few slides ago, are in completely different films, on different films, or in different collections. So make sure you're starting here looking for the book and page number, and then you can go and look through all the many images and then go straight to the one that you need. So again, this is very similar to just going through a book like you would have in school, looking in the index for what you needed, the page number, and going right to it, where you don't have to read the entire book in order to know what it contains. Not all records have this, and some of them are organized in funky ways, or the indexes are missing, or they're organized unhelpfully, like by the name of the child's father instead of the child, or the other way around, indexed by the name of a child in a baptismal record, and maybe you don't know the name of the child because you were looking for all of the children of this one couple. So many different strategies we use. Not everything is going to work with this, but most of the time this will be helpful for you. And this I wanted to demo for you guys real quick. This is easier than just doing a bunch of screen share. But if you're interested in getting involved in making these records available, there's a program, especially at Family Search, that you can join for free and do on your own time. And it is called indexing. So I will very quickly show you guys what that looks like. If you go into Family Search and you make sure you're logged into your account, you can go up here to get involved and click indexing. And this can be a little bit confusing the first few times you do it. So this is another reason I wanted to walk you through it. So if you go here to find a project, you know what skills you have as far as your ability to read old handwriting, what maybe you speak another language pretty well or can read another language pretty well. And so being able to go in here and choose a project will help you find one that fits you and your skill set. So I had this set to Spanish originally, but I can set this to, these are a number of languages that Family Search has records in. And you can imagine there's probably not as much of a demand for Estonian records as there is for the United States. So this is frequently why records like this are still not indexed also. So if you really want to make a contribution, and especially if you speak a foreign language, this is a great way to do it. If I went into English language, I can then set the difficulty level or rank the difficulty level, sort by it. And these little bars will tell you how much of the project has already been indexed and how much of it has been reviewed. So if you're nervous about wanting to help, but you're worried about making a mistake, don't be worried about it because they have people who check your work. So I might be able then, and this is because it's English language, we're going to be covering a bunch of different countries, not just the United States. You'll see there are a ton of Irish projects right now that need to be transcribed, South African, and then we've got One Lonely Texas Deed project here. So if I wanted to then index these, I could click index and it will pop up. This is an advanced project. It will pop up the images. It will give you little instructions here on the side about what you should be transcribing, how to do it, some instructions here. It looks a little intense. This one is a little more difficult, but really when it comes down to it, if you go here to entries, you're just going to select, okay, well, if these were baptismal records, for example, you're just transcribing what you're reading, and for all of these people. So that makes that is how the sausage is made, essentially. That's how these records get online. And there are other organizations that have programs like this where you can volunteer. I know the Smithsonian had one. It was not genealogical, but you could help transcribe some of their like old 19th century science journals that people had gone out and taken nature notes in, things like that. So this is a really great way to spend your time if you would like to be able to give back and make sure that those records can be made searchable for the next group of people like you that want to find their ancestors. And finally, I wanted to talk to you about the flip side of the image-only collection principle, which may be more common, and that is where repositories and websites have indexes, but not images. And this is the other side of the coin about being a thorough genealogist, that it always involves getting back to the original record. For example, HSP has several databases for collections that we have organized from our own collections, where these are, you can put in the name, but you would have to request the image from HSP in order to see the original. And there are lots of reasons you would want to do that. Frequently, indexes do not contain all of the information that might be on an original record, kind of like this one, including things like marginal notes. They may not transcribe things like addresses, other key clues that you would need. So it's always best if you want to go to HSP and try to find something, for example, in our encounters database, you can read here about all the different kinds of things that HSP has. And if you wanted to search our members only databases, which you do have to be a subscribing member of HSP, these are some indexes of the type that I'm talking about, where we have had volunteers come in and spend time transcribing for each of these collections that then you can search by name. So again, be sure to check not just HSP if you have Pennsylvania ancestry, but the various historical and genealogical societies in other parts of the world where you have ancestors, because we are not unique in trying to make these sorts of things available. I do want to address, why is there just an index? Why do I have to pay for the image? This is a big deal in genealogy in general. And I think this is just a good time to note that this process of hosting images and transcribing things, even when you're using volunteers, is very expensive. We have to be able to preserve these documents in high quality ways for generations. We have to be able to manage the volunteers. So, you have to pay employee wages. Employees deserve to make a fair wage. And there are millions and millions of these kinds of records. So that naturally limits what a repository can and can't do, and how fast they can do this. So sometimes we find that the quickest solution is to create an index that doesn't involve the expensive process of uploading, like photographing and uploading and hosting images, where you can just quickly search if your ancestor is in that index, is in that collection. And then when you make a request to the library or facility in question, and they pull it for you, even if they charge you a small fee, you're contributing so that maybe one day these databases can expand. You can imagine not everyone has the budgets that we would like to be able to have, certainly not compared to behemoths like ancestry.com. So just a gentle reminder to be patient with your local repositories as you are making searches and wondering why things can't always be as convenient as we would like them to be. So I have finished up a little bit early, but I figured that there would be a few questions, and I am happy to demo some more things. So please let me know, start letting me know in the comments and Q&A how I can help you here.
We have a comment in the Q&A asking, in regards to the transcription volunteering that you reference, Family Search, I would like to know how to volunteer to help with correcting bad transcriptions. I cannot find a project connected to them on the volunteering section. And it just refers to finding errors in
Right.
including records that are HSP records. So how can we how can people volunteer to correct transcriptions?
Right. I am just reading through the rest of this. So with HSP specifically, it would be good to send a message to one of our library staff. You can even just send a chat through our main page and let folks know. And we can have the people over our transcription efforts take a look at that. As far as I know, Ancestry has an option where you can correct it in the actual record itself. You say this isn't right. I don't know how Family Search is handling that. I can look into that if you want to drop me an email and see how you would correct that at Family Search. That is an issue, yeah. And that's why when we're talking about indexing and volunteering, make sure that you are sticking to projects that you feel very confident in, so that you're not necessarily going to be making these same mistakes. And you're right, sometimes these are errors of computers. Increasingly, there's been a lot of talk about AI and such, and genealogy is one of those areas that AI is being brought into with text handwriting recognition. And especially as that's early and new, there are going to be mistakes.
Okay. We have another question. Well, for someone who asks, who does one contact with a possible document donation, if you'd like to donate to HSP, we are an active collecting institution. We do accept documents. I will put the link there in the chat. We have another question. Since you showed us a list of HSP collections, is it accurate to assume that not everything in those collections will show up in a Discover search?
Yeah, so HSP has nearly 22 million items, and since we have been in existence since the 1820s, naturally you can imagine there have been a few different cataloging systems used over time. And while most of our collections are found in the Discover search, which is that online catalog, there are quite a number of our collection items that are not. There is an on-site hard copy card catalog, for example, and you might want to look at the digital library, and it may be organized differently. I'm not actually sure if the digital library is done. I don't think it's through Discover. So that is a little complicated. Yeah.
Someone else asks, is help available at HSP for people using the affiliate library service?
We have reference librarians, yes, that can come over and help walk you through that. And I had a slide that seems to have been eaten by my computer, but I also offer, you can purchase one-on-one consultations with me as well. If you would like to spend time getting that individual help, I would be happy to help you do that.
Another question in the Q&A, are the images that are part of the Family Search indexing projects also available to browse?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they're actively available to browse, sometimes they're not. not being a family search employee, I don't always know what their criteria are for what they allow and what they don't. It's always good to check though, check the catalog.
Let's see what else.
There's some in the comments too, I think.
Yes, more comments. The last DB you showed, that I'm assuming that means database. Can you show the next step, how you search it by name?
Okay, which one was that? The last database.
While you look for that, another comment said, in Australia, we have newspapers with OCR that volunteers can correct as they go to improve the searchability. It's called Trove and it's free.
Trove is wonderful, yeah. And OCR tends to work best on newspapers because they're TypeScript. Obviously with AI, it's going to take a little longer for it to get good at reading old handwriting. I mean, we as humans are not always good at it. So I'm not sure if you're referring to, you know, from my slides, these image only collections from Ancestry, like the residence registers, they are not searchable by name. Put a clarification in the comments if you meant something else. Oh. Oh, it was the encounters. Yes. I will show you encounters real quick then. So you go to encounters.hsp.org. Unfortunately, you know what, I have to share my screen too. So typically, if you go into encounters, I apologize, I am not on my work computer. So this is, I did not realize that this was not going to be able to show me encounters. Again, drop me an email and I will walk you through how to do that. We do have a how-to for our databases and our, if you go into collections, catalogs and research tools, we do have a library guide to searching Discover, and also some information on a digital library and some of these other finding aids. So we should have some material online that can help you figure out how to do that. It's quite simple. Just poke around in there a little bit, or like I said, drop me an email.
Another question. I have Ancestry and I'm doing historical research on the 18th century, United States and England. Could you comment about family search and will it provide additional information for me?
I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. What kind of information do you want? Are you looking, if you're looking for parish records to be able to trace ancestry, yes, family search is going to have records like that. You know, there's no easy way to answer that question because it just entirely depends on where exactly, what exact time period and what kinds of information you need. You can email me as well, merchant information. Okay, so yeah, that if you're not looking specifically for genealogical information, you're looking more for maybe business records or something like that. That might be something you're looking more at, things like historical societies or National Archives type records. That's probably not going to be something that you're going to get on a genealogy site like Family Search. But again, check their catalog and make sure. You can search by search terms like merchant and see what they have.
Any additional questions? We have the time, so if anyone has any more specific questions they want to ask, we might as well use it. So if you feel like you're holding us up, you're not. Yes, I created a link for the handout because some people are having issues viewing the file attachment. So I am putting the link to the handout in the chat again. Another question, Can you confirm if records from defunct Lutheran churches in Central PA is stored at Gettysburg College?
I would contact Gettysburg College or check their catalog. I'm sure that they have one. I don't know off the top of my head.
Another question, where is the best place to find poorhouse records?
Again, this will depend on where you're looking and what era. Some of those records might be at a place like Ancestry or Family Search. I know that they do have some for certain locations. I know repositories like HSP have poorhouse records. They may not be indexed, they may not be searchable. You might have to make a request to come in and search them or have one of our staff search them for you. But I would check with, if it's run by the church, the local church, but with historical societies and genealogical societies, that's a great place to search to start.
A great question that goes with that is, are there any restrictions now when visiting HSP? There are not. We are open Tuesday through Friday, and we have extended hours on Wednesday evenings. And as of April 4th, we are also lifting our mask policy, and our building has been newly renovated. So please make an appointment, come in. We want to see you. We want you to be in the reading room. But if you can't come in, we also have like research by mail services where our librarians will do research for you. Let's see, questions in the Q&A. Another HSP question. I tried to volunteer at HSP, but the website said no slots available. How would I find out if a slot is open? Hi, Nick. So if you want to volunteer at HSP, we sort of halted accepting volunteers during COVID, but now that we're back on site, we are accepting volunteers again. And I think it would depend what you want to do. So like if you want to volunteer with Katie, you would email her. If you want to volunteer with in the archives, you would email the director of the archives. If you wanted to volunteer in the library, you would email the director of the library, etc. And you can find that information on our staff list on our website. Another,
if I could quickly add to that, Selena, keep in mind too that, and I cannot see you. I do not know anything about the people commenting here, but volunteering is, we are always happy to have volunteers, but keep in mind too that we will be looking for people that have certain skill sets that we need to, and, or, wanting to use you in some places where you might do the best versus other areas. So, it's not just kind of something where you can come in and walk in and be put to work, so.
Someone in the Q&A said, not sure how to access the various collections in Ancestry and Family Search. Can you comment on that, Katie?
Not sure how to access the various collections in Ancestry and Family Search. I might need that question to be a little more specific. Are you just talking about the image-only collections? Are you talking about a specific database? Again, that card catalog that both of those websites have is going to be a great tool for you. So I would start with the catalog.
Let's see in the chat. I am trying to find a Scottish ancestor to Pennsylvania, arrived in early 1800s. I think I can find the county where they may have lived. Any suggestions?
I'm assuming you mean a Pennsylvania county. Well, I always advise people to start with what they know and work backwards. So if you know he was in Pennsylvania, if you don't know where he was, do you know where his children were? Start there, start in the county where any place where some member of that family adjacent to him had connections. Start there, start with the early censuses. I would check on a lot of those property records in the early 1800s, probate records, deeds, especially if he was a landowner, which is quite likely, or if he paid tax, he'll probably be on a tax list, even if he didn't own property. So I would start there.
Another question, are any of your manuscripts scanned so they can be browsed online?
Yeah, so digitallibrary.hsp.org is where we are currently hosting our digitized collections so they can be browsed.
Great. And for those asking, we will send the handout and Katie's email and other few follow-up links in a post-program email. So you'll get a lot of this information again in an additional email, and you'll have contact information. Let's see, someone suggested National Archives as volunteer opportunities. What email address should I use to connect about the HSP records with the poor place name transcriptions?
Go ahead and just send that email to me and I will make sure it gets where it needs to go.
I will put Katie's email in the chat again, kbarnes@hsp.org. And if you need to reach me, I'm sbmac@hsp.org. Let's see, who else? Any suggestions of where to look for a widow with 3 young children who arrived from Glasgow to Philadelphia in 1817? I can't find her or the children until the oldest child is an adult.
Yeah, that would be a tricky time period. One of the questions I would have there, thinking about HSP collections, is if she was a widow, if she was in need at all, there were a ton of different kinds of aid organizations in Philadelphia throughout the 1800s. She may have appeared with her children. Some of those records can be quite descriptive. So I would get on the catalog or talk to an HSP librarian and, start looking into aid organizations or I'm trying to think of the other word. Start there. Start with things like that. Explain this to our librarians and they would be able to help you with that. She might also appear on tax lists herself as the head of her household, and those tax lists might be somewhere on Ancestry or Family Search, one of the big genealogy sites already. I would check, make sure, did she leave a will? There should be an 1820 census. If she hadn't remarried by then, she might appear on the 1820 census by herself.
And if you have a question like that, like you're in search of a specific record and you think HSP may have something or may be able to help, we have something called Lib Answers, which is basically just a little thing on our website. I'll put the link in the chat where you can submit a question and one of our librarians will respond to you in an email. They also, on Mondays and Fridays for a certain window, librarians are live on Lib Answers, so you can chat with them in real time. And it's just like another service we offer if you have questions about our records or something you might be looking for. So you can just quickly submit your question and the librarian will email you back as soon as they can. We have a couple other ones. Are there records generally for people who were brokers for English indentured servants to Philadelphia in the 1770s?
So again, that's going to depend because I know HSP definitely does have records pertaining to indentured servants and the groups that brought them here. However, these were going to be private records held by these individuals or by the companies that they represented. And so it's going to totally depend on which company, which individual or group, and whether that survived, whether it's been donated to HSP. It gets more complicated when the records are private and they're not these government records that you can send a request to, like, the State Department of Health to receive a copy of. So again, I would confer with our librarians, check our catalog, use some of those indenture search terms. And it's possible. It's certainly possible.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Any search suggestions on closed adoptions in Philadelphia around the early 1900s?
I'm assuming you're wanting to identify biological parents with that question. So, I mean, if the adoptions are closed legally and you can't get a hold of the paperwork there are ways to go around that and try to identify biological parents. DNA is a really good tool for that. It's more difficult. It's way more challenging in historical cases like that, where you're talking a couple generations back. I would probably recommend contracting with a professional genetic genealogist to answer that question. It's a pretty advanced way to use DNA. They may also appear in, there are orphanage records HSP has, and Children's Aid Society, different types of records that helped or that described orphan children and the aid that was given to them. So yeah, check the catalog, talk to a librarian with more specifics about your question.
All right, and we'll take one more question. Do HSP records overlap or are duplicated with the records at the Pennsylvania County Historical Societies?
That's a good question. There will be some records at HSP that do duplicate at a variety of sources. For example, HSP has a lot of Philadelphia city directories on our shelves, for example. Those may be at the county level historical societies. They're definitely on Ancestry. So there will be some things that do overlap. Again, this would be good to know what you're looking for specifically so that I could tell you whether that does overlap or not. It's possible. Yeah.
So we are just about out of time. Again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to send Katie an email and she will get back to you as soon as she can. If you have any questions about our programs and not genealogy, I can probably help you, but she is the expert on family history. But we really enjoyed having you. We had some great time for Q&A, and I enjoyed seeing all of your questions here. Please keep coming to our programs. We really love having you. We have an upcoming program on April 18th, which is free for everyone. It is going to be hybrid. So if you have not yet been to HSP and you would like to come, we will be open and on site looking at genealogical records from the True Family Papers, and that is in collaboration with Clifton of the National Trust and the African American Genealogy Group. We also have a family history sampler coming up in May, which is a seminar hosted in collaboration with the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania, who many of you are familiar with and also members of, and that will be all day again here at HSP, but also virtually online. So for those of you who are not local, you can still participate in that. Thank you again for joining us. You are helping to support the work that we do to preserve these records and educate the public about them. And again, thank you to our members. Your support is very critical for the work that we do. So that's it for us. Please feel free to reach out to us in the future, and we hope to see you again. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.